But logic has little power against the cold tendrils of fear that still wrap around my heart in the dead of night. I still check my locks compulsively. I still scan crowds, looking for a familiar, nondescript face in an old coat. I still feel a jolt of panic when the mail arrives, especially if there's a plain white envelope. I never found out who it was. I never found out why. Were they trying to drive me insane? Were they building up to something worse? Or was it just a cruel, elaborate game played by someone with too much time and a warped sense of observation? Sometimes I wonder if the move even mattered. If someone capable of entering my locked apartment, of knowing the intimate details of my solitary life, could find me again if they truly wanted to. That uncertainty is its own kind of prison. The letters stopped, but the watcher never really left. They live inside my head now, a permanent resident in the quiet, anxious corners of my mind. They are the reason I pause before opening my mail, the reason I sleep with the light on, the reason a simple, typed note on plain white paper remains the most terrifying thing I can imagine. They proved their point. They could get to me. And the chilling possibility remains that someday they might decide to do so again. It started subtly, like most insidious things do. Not with a bang, but with a plain white envelope tucked between junk mail and a bill. It arrived on a Tuesday, I think. Rain was lashing against the windows of my small basement apartment, the kind of dreary, persistent drizzle that seeps into your bones and makes the world feel gray and muffled. I'd just gotten home from my data entry job, a soul-crushing cycle of spreadsheets and flickering monitors, and I was sorting through the usual pile of unwanted offers and local flyers on the damp doormat. The envelope had no return address. My name and address were typed, not handwritten, on a cheap adhesive label, slightly crooked. Inside was a single sheet of plain white paper, also typed. It wasn't a threat, not exactly. It wasn't even personal, not really. It just said, "The sycamore tree outside your window loses its leaves unevenly. The north side first." That was it. No signature, no context. I frowned, read it again, glanced at the single, grimy window well that provided my only view of the outside world, a patch of neglected communal garden dominated by the gnarled branches of an old sycamore. It was losing its leaves, and maybe the north side was balding faster. Odd thing to notice. Odd thing to write down and send to a stranger. I tossed it in the recycling bin with the pizza coupons and supermarket flyers. Probably some weird local survey, I figured. Or maybe a prank from one of the kids in the building upstairs, though I rarely saw them. Just another piece of urban flotsam. I made dinner, watched some mindless TV, and forgot about it. Or I thought I forgot about it. A week later, another envelope. Same plain white, same typed label, slightly less crooked this time. Same lack of return address. I hesitated before opening it, a strange little knot tightening in my stomach. This time, the message was different, but equally banal, equally observant. You favor the blue mug in the mornings, even when the red one is clean. Again, no signature. I stood there, holding the paper, looking at the row of mugs hanging above my sink. There was the chipped blue one, my favorite, faded from countless dishwasher cycles. And next to it, the bright red one, rarely used. How? My kitchen window faced the sycamore tree, the same view as my main window well. Could someone see in? I went to the window, peered out through the rain-streaked glass and the security bars. The sycamore branches were mostly bare now. Beyond them was the back wall of the opposite building, bricked up windows on the lower levels. Higher up, maybe, but it seemed unlikely. And who would bother? Who would watch someone drinking coffee through a basement window well, and then type up a note about it? This time, I didn't throw it away immediately. I tucked it into a kitchen drawer, behind the spare batteries and the instruction manual for the microwave I never used. It felt unsettling. Not frightening yet, just weird. Like a tiny, misplaced detail in an otherwise ordinary picture. Life went on. Days bled into weeks. The weather turned colder. I trudged to work, stared at spreadsheets, came home, ate solitary meals. I started drawing the cheap blind over my window well more often, even during the day, telling myself it was because the low autumn sun glared too much, not because I felt watched. Then the third letter arrived. Plain white envelope, typed label, no return address. My hand actually trembled as I picked it up. Sometimes, when you think no one is looking, you trace the small scar above your left eyebrow. A reminder. Ice flooded my veins. The scar. It was tiny, almost invisible, hidden by my eyebrow, unless you looked closely. A childhood accident involving a swing set and a moment of reckless abandon. I did sometimes trace it, unconsciously, when I was lost in thought or feeling stressed. It was a completely private, absent-minded gesture. Something no one could possibly notice from across a garden, through a dirty window well. Panic, cold and sharp, began to bloom in my chest. This wasn't random. This wasn't a prank. Someone was watching me closely, knew my habits, knew intimate details. The feeling of being observed intensified tenfold. Every creak of the floorboards from the apartment above, every footstep in the hallway outside my door, every shadow that flickered past my window, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I took the letter, along with the previous two, out of the drawer, laid them side by side on my small table. The sycamore leaf observation, the blue mug, the scar, seemingly random, yet undeniably personal, typed impersonal font on plain paper. Anonymous. Who was doing this? Why? Was it someone I knew? Someone from work, a neighbor. My mind raced, casting suspicion on everyone and no one. The quiet guy in accounting who rarely made eye contact. The overly friendly woman next door who always seemed to be watering plants near my window. It felt insane. I felt insane. I started changing my routine. took different routes home from the bus stop, even though it added 10 minutes to my walk. I stopped sitting near the window. I bought thicker curtains. I started sleeping with a heavy maglite torch beside my bed, though I wasn't sure what good it would do. I considered going to the police again, but what would I show them? 3 cryptic, typed notes. They'd already dismissed me once. They'd think I was losing my mind, seeking attention. And maybe I was. Maybe the stress of the job, the isolation of living alone in a basement apartment in a city where I knew few people, was getting to me. Maybe I was imagining the watcher, projecting my own anxieties onto these strange letters. But the scar, how could they know about the scar? The 4th letter came 2 weeks later. This one felt different even before I opened it. The envelope was the same, but it felt slightly heavier. You looked beautiful in the rain last Thursday. Pity about the broken umbrella spoke. Did you manage to fix it? Last Thursday, it had poured down. My cheap umbrella had indeed buckled under a sudden gust of wind, one of the metal spokes snapping as I wrestled with it just outside my building's entrance, getting soaked in the process. I'd cursed, thrown the useless thing in the bin inside the lobby, and dripped my way down to my apartment, miserable and wet. Someone had seen that specific, embarrassing moment. Someone knew about the broken spoke. Someone was close. Inside this envelope, besides the typed note, was something else. A small, pressed flower. A pansy, its purple and yellow face delicate and unnervingly perfect. It looked like something snipped from the very communal garden outside my window. I dropped the letter and the flower as if they'd burned me. My breath hitched. This felt like an escalation, a trophy, a keepsake taken from my vicinity. The anonymity was dissolving, replaced by a chilling sense of proximity. The watcher wasn't just observing from afar. They were close enough to pick a flower from the garden I walked past every day. They were leaving physical tokens now. That night, sleep was impossible. Every noise was amplified. Was that a footstep outside? A key scraping in a lock? Was the watcher in the building? I wedged a chair under my doorknob, a flimsy, pathetic defense that offered little comfort. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the maglite clutched in my hand, listening, waiting. The letters started coming more frequently. Every few days now. Each one contained some minute detail of my life. The delivery guy from Golden Dragon always gets lost finding your apartment. True, the building numbering was confusing. You hum off-key when you're washing dishes. Mostly old pop songs. Embarrassingly true. That gray cardigan has a loose thread near the cuff. You keep meaning to snip it. I did, and I hadn't. Each note was a tiny pinprick, accumulating into a constant, agonizing awareness of being dissected. My life, my mundane, unremarkable life, was being cataloged by an unseen entity. The watcher knew my takeout orders, my musical deficiencies, the state of my wardrobe. The knowledge was terrifyingly intimate, yet delivered with cold, typed detachment. There were no more flowers, just the relentless, unnerving observations. I became a ghost in my own life. I spoke to colleagues only when necessary, head down, avoiding eye contact. I rushed home, locking myself in, drawing the blinds, sitting in the near dark. I stopped calling my parents as often, afraid the watcher might somehow be listening, afraid of alarming them, afraid of admitting the depth of my fear. The world outside my apartment walls felt hostile, populated by potential watchers. Every stranger on the bus, every person walking down the street, their face was a potential mask for the one tormenting me. My work suffered. My boss called me in, concerned about my slipping performance, my withdrawn demeanor. I mumbled excuses about not sleeping well. He suggested I take some time off. I couldn't afford to. One evening, desperation clawed at me. I had to do something. I decided to wait. I turned off all the lights in my apartment, except for a dim lamp in the corner, furthest from the window. I sat on the floor, hidden from the window well's line of sight, my back against the wall, the maglite heavy in my lap. I waited for the telltale rustle of the mail being pushed through the slot. Hours passed. My muscles cramped. My eyes burned from staring into the dimness. The building settled around me with its usual groans and sighs. Just as I was about to give up, convinced my paranoia had finally consumed me, I heard it. The faint thump of mail hitting the doormat. I held my breath, straining to hear. Silence. Then, the almost imperceptible scritch of an envelope sliding under the door. Not through the mail slot this time. Under the door itself. My heart leaped into my throat. They were right outside, right there. Adrenaline surged. Without thinking, I scrambled up, flicked on the main light, wrenched the chair away from the door, fumbled with the chain, and threw the door open. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the worn carpet and the peeling paint. No one. Just the lingering scent of damp wool and something else, something metallic and cold, like old pennies. And there, lying on the welcome mat just inside my apartment, was the envelope. Plain white, typed label. I slammed the door shut, locked it, jammed the chair back under the knob. My hands were shaking violently. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath. They had been inches away. They had waited until I was home, until I was inside, and slid it under the door. They knew I was waiting. I couldn't bring myself to open the envelope immediately. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, rocking back and forth. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. I was trapped. This wasn't just watching anymore. This was interaction, albeit one-sided. This was psychological torture. Eventually, numbly, I picked up the envelope. It felt thicker than usual, stiff. Inside, the usual typed note. Patience is a virtue, but yours is wearing thin, isn't it? Beneath the note was a photograph. A Polaroid, grainy, slightly blurry, taken in low light. It was of me, asleep in my own bed, my face slack, vulnerable. taken from the foot of the bed, taken from inside my bedroom. A strangled sob escaped me. This was the proof, the undeniable, terrifying proof. They had been in my room while I slept, close enough to take a picture. The violation was absolute, stripping away the last vestiges of security I thought I possessed. My home wasn't safe. My bed wasn't safe. Nowhere was safe. That was the breaking point. The carefully constructed dam of denial and rationalization burst, and raw terror flooded everything. I didn't just call the police. I screamed down the phone until they sent a patrol car. 2 different officers this time. They listened, looked at the photo, the collection of notes I'd saved. They were more serious, their earlier dismissiveness replaced with a cautious concern. They took fingerprints, though they found none that didn't belong to me, documented everything, asked more questions. Did I have an ex? Anyone with a grudge? Anyone I'd argued with recently? The answer was always no. My life was too quiet for enemies. They installed a new lock on my door, suggested I get bars for the inside of the window, well too. They promised extra patrols, but their reassurances felt hollow. How do you patrol against a ghost? Someone who could seemingly bypass locks, know your habits, enter your sanctuary while you slept, and leave only a photograph and crippling fear behind. The letters stopped after that night, completely. As if the photograph, the ultimate violation, had been the goal all along. As if proving they could get to me, invade my most private space, was enough. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was worse. The anticipation, the constant looking over my shoulder, the flinching at every unexpected noise, it didn't fade. It intensified. Every day without a letter was just the prelude to the next one. Every quiet night was just the calm before the storm. I lasted another 3 months in that apartment, living on frayed nerves and caffeine. I barely slept. I lost weight. My reflection in the mirror showed a haunted stranger with dark circles under her eyes. Finally, I broke my lease, packed my few belongings, and moved. I didn't just move across town. I moved to a different city entirely, hours away. I got a new job, a new phone number, an apartment on the 3rd floor with no easily accessible windows. I told no one from my old life where I'd gone, except my parents, sworn to secrecy. I cut ties, deleted social media, tried to erase myself. It's been nearly 5 years since I moved. 5 years since the last letter, the photograph. Logically, I should feel safe. Logically, the watcher, whoever they were, has moved on, forgotten about me. Or perhaps was never even focused solely on me to begin with.